Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In this one we're going to actually try to code the first parts of Jhin as a champion, and we are going to be exploring functions, classes, creating instances of a class, and variables. And we're going to be doing that through creating Jhin as a champion, and then choosing that champion in the game. So that's our end goal, and if you haven't watched the previous videos, I highly recommend it because this wouldn't make much sense without those. So I will put links in the description if so you haven't watched it. Here we have Jhin. If you haven't played the champion, I'm guessing most of you already have because you're watching this video. Well, you can see Jhin here. He is. You can see my name on top. So, if you pick Jhin in League, it's going to have Jhin for you with your name, with your skin that you chose in the game. Well, what we can see in the bottom here is that he has a set of attributes associated with him, right? His attack damage is 69. He has 30 armor, 0.63 attack speed, etc., etc. So we have that here as well. And this can get changed by runes, but we're going to ignore runes for now. Then we have our HP. As you can see here, we have 585 HP, and we're currently at full HP. So it's our maximum HP and our current HP, and the same goes for the mana that we have at the bottom. So that's what we want to actually code here. Can we actually code these attributes for Jhin? So let's get into it. So as you can see here, I have my IDE open. I'm going to be using Java for these exercises, and I have a few reasons. I think it's a good language to start off in because it's easy to understand compared to some of the lower level languages. That's number one. Number two, Java is very popular in the industry. A lot of the corporate companies actually use Java for their backend. And number three is even in game development, a lot of the development is done in C#, which is very close to Java. So I think it's a very good language to learn, especially if you want to get into game development or just in general. So here's IntelliJ. I'm not going to actually go through how to set it up. How to set up IntelliJ and be able to run Java, because there's plenty of videos online showing how to do that. So if you just do a quick YouTube search, you'll find it. Obviously, if you guys see that you're still having trouble, just put it in the comment and I can do a quick video on it as well. So here, let's create our class, Jhin. So if you remember from the first video, we said, we define what a class is. You can think of it as a class in World of Warcraft. You can think of it as a champion in League. So we're just going to name the class exactly like the name of the champion. So here we have a class, public class Jhin, and you can think of public as everyone can create Jhin. Right, and in the game it's the same in the game, right? Everyone can actually choose Jhin as a champion. It's not like it's specific to anyone. So that's what the public means here. And now let's add some variables. So as we saw in the game, one of the things that Jhin has is his attack damage. And attack damage was a whole number, right? It was like 69. So we can say integer, which means that it's a whole number, and we're going to call that attribute attack damage. Right? So what integer does is it makes sure that whatever value we give this attack damage, it has to be a number. It has to be a whole number. It can't be like a word, or it can't be a decimal. And this ensures that no one by accident does that. The next thing we would add in is, let's add in the armor, for example. And then we can do the max health is also an integer, right? And then we will do integer current health. Okay, so attack damage, armor, max health, current health, and we can add a lot more, right? Magic resist, attack speed, etc., etc. So we're just gonna stop at this. And then the other thing I want to add is, if you remember from the game, I had my summoner name at the top whenever Jin loaded into the game. So I'm going to have a string this time called summoner name. And the reason we're saying it's a string, it's because it can also be, it can have letters and it can have numbers, right? So I could be reporter 69, I could be 11223 SSDS, etc., etc., right? So let's stick to these variables for now. So now, how do we set these numbers to be the numbers that we just saw in the game, right? So in the game, we saw that the attack damage was 69, for example, the armor was 30. How do we actually set that up? So if you look at League, before that game actually starts and the champion loads into the game, none of these things are meaningful, right? It doesn't mean anything that, you know, Jin exists. So Jin has to come into existence, and how that happens is a player chooses to play that champion, and then a copy of Jin is created in the game. And we have to do that same functionality in the code. And the way you do that, and it's called a constructor. What a constructor means is we're constructing a copy of Jin. That's really what it means. And the way the syntax is, again, we want anyone to be able to create a copy of Jin. And we say public Jin. And then we give and this is a function, by the way. And then we give the function, what are the values that the player can actually set whenever they're creating Jin. The first thing is their summoner name, right? So if I'm choosing Jin, my summoner name will get copied onto him. It's like I am Jin, right? The other thing that we choose in the champion select are the runes, right? We're gonna leave runes for another session because it's a bit more complicated. But for now, we're just going to say summoner name because that's the only thing that a player can choose for now. Let's say we're making a simpler version of the game to start with. So here we, the player summoner name, right? We will get more into depth of what each of these do and everything, but all we're saying is the player can pass their summoner name to us, right? And here, what we're going to say is for this copy of Jin, right? For this copy of Jin, we want the summoner name attribute of Jin to be equal to the same summoner name that the player has. Okay, this is what this line of code means. But what about all the other stuff, right? Like the attack damage, armor, max health, current health. Is that something a player sets, or is it something that programmatically the developers are setting? We have no say of what the base attack damage of Jin is, right? So here it's totally in our power to set that up. And we're going to say for this copy of Jin, the attack power is going to be 69. I may not remember exactly what they were, but just bear with me. His armor, we want it to start at 30. His max health, we want it to be 500. And you always start the game at full health, right? So the current health has to be equal to the max health. So we can say it like this, right? Whatever we set for max health, we want current health to be the same. And here this is how a copy of Jin can get created. So whenever you call this function and you say, I want the Jin, here's my summoner name, and we will automatically set everything else. And if you pay attention, like if you look at different champions, they have different base attack damage and armor, max health, and current health, right? And if you ever look at, you know, when in patch notes, whenever like they're buffing the base damage of a champion or they're nerfing their armor, etc., it's as simple as some developer coming in the code and just, you know, changing these numbers 2 seconds, right? I think that's quite cool and quite powerful. All right, so with that, let's look at how we can actually now create Jin. So in the actual game, whenever you actually load the League client and you go into Champions League and you choose to play Jhin, it doesn't really have any meaning until the actual game starts, right? It's only when the actual game starts that you enter Summoner's Rift, and then Jhin is there and you can move him around and you can buy items, etc., right? So the game starting is the actual point where Jhin gets created. And in order to do that in the programming, and in different languages it's different. In Java, what you do is you need to have a main function, and it's the same with C# and C and a lot of other classes. You need a point of entry where the game actually starts. You can think of it that way. It's a point of entry into the code that you wrote, and you can just copy the lingo for now. You don't really need to necessarily know everything that's here, but we're going to keep it like this. And you can copy this piece of code whenever you're writing your code, but just know that this is the entry point into our game, into our application. And you can associate it to Welcome to Summoner's Rift if you want, initially, to get you more familiar with it. And here, one caveat with working with Java here, plain Java, is that we can't really replicate the UI elements of the game, right? We can't actually create Summoner's Rift or create Jhin and put him on the screen for us to see. In order to do that, we should use some set of other tools to create the graphical elements. I was going to do that, but I think it's better if we start with just the code, and then later on, if there is desire, we can actually use another tool like Unity and actually create a simplified version of the game, and it's quite possible. So for now, in order to represent the graphical elements, we're just going to write text on the screen. And in order to do that, we're going to say, and the way you do it is you just say system.out.print. Println is a function which prints the sentence you write, or whatever you write, and then comes one line down. Okay, so over here we're going to imitate the League client, and we're going to say welcome to some. And if I run this code right now, all that's going to happen, as you can see, I'm not creating, there's no implication that Jhin's in the game, right? All we're saying is welcome to Summoner's Rift. So you can imagine you're loading into the game and there's no one on the screen. Okay, let's run it. Let's see if it works. Over here, you can see welcome to Summoner's Rift. I can make this a little bit more cleaner. We can actually, and you can play around with this. But I'm going to first print like a bunch of equal signs. And let's run this. And you have welcome to Summoner's Rift here. Okay, so now we're going to move to the next part. Now we want to actually create a copy of Jhin. Okay, so before we actually come to Summoner's Rift, let's say we're in Champion Select, and I am choosing a champion, and I want to choose Jhin. And the way you tell the code to create a copy of Jhin is you say, I want Jhin, and I'm going to call, and you have to give it a name because you're associating that Jhin to yourself. It's only like a name of a variable. So you're going to say my Jhin, for example. The name of the variable is your choice. The better the name, the more clear the name is, the better. And the way you say create a copy in Java is you use the keyword new, and then you say I want a copy of Jhin. And if you remember in the function that we wrote, in order to create a copy of Jhin, we need to pass in the summoner name. And my summoner name, for example, in League is... Okay, and here I've created a copy of Jhin, but I'm not showing it in the game, right? So if I actually just run this code, I'm creating a copy of Jhin, but I need to actually show it in the game as well. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is write a piece of code here to just print my my name, my attack damage, armor, max health, current health, and just print it. Okay, and I'm just gonna do that real quick. So as you can see, we wrote a simple function, and all it's doing is it's returning a string, if you remember, like our summoner name. And what it's doing in the string is printing, it's saying, here's Jin, his attack damage is the attack damage, his armor is armor, max health, current health, and the summoner name. So now if I go into the League of Legends code base and we have welcome to Summoner's Rift, and I'm going to say print in the game, put in the game my Jin, the Jin that we just created a copy of, and I'm going to call that function that we created. Okay, and if I actually run this game, you'll see it'll say welcome to Summoner's Rift, and it will actually have, so if you look over here, it says welcome to Summoner's Rift, and here's Jin. And you can see his attack damage is 69, armor 30, max health 500, current health 500, and his summoner name is Reporter. And if you think about it, if you associate each of these attributes to a UI element that were just shown in League, this would actually be a copy of Jin in League. And just to showcase that you can create multiple copies for different people, let's say I'm playing blind pick, right? And Sneaky is, somehow I'm playing with Sneaky, and he also chooses Jin. I can create another copy of Jin in that same game, and his summoner name is, let's say it's Sneaky. And then if I put my Jin in the game, I can also put his Jin in the game, and you'll see that it's two different copies. Our base attack damage and armor, etc. are all the same, but our summoner names are different, so there's two copies of Jin in the game. So here's my Jin with summoner name Reporter, and here's Sneaky. Oh, okay, this is actually good that this happened. So over here you see I'm saying print on the screen my Jin. I'm also saying print on the second time. I'm also saying print on the screen my Jin. I need to put, the other Jin's name on here, like the other variable. So if I fix this, and I run this, you'll see that in the first one it's Reporter, the second one is Sneaky. So now we're on the Rift. There's one Jin who is me, and there's one Jin who is Sneaky. And with that, we have pretty much created the basis of our champion, and we will add to that as we learn more. So what you want to do as an exercise before we move on is to create your own champion, maybe create two different ones, whichever champions that you enjoy the most in League. Try to create them, try to add all their different attributes. You can go further than I have. You can include all the other stuff, for example, their mana, their level, and other things that you can think of, and try to create a way for you to instantiate copies of that class. And you can even copy paste the way I have printed them on screen, and then create your own game and try to put a bunch of copies of those champions onto the Rift and see if you can do it. I recommend watching the video first without actually coding, and then try to replicate the same thing on your side and add to it. Bonus points, see if you can actually write a function to level up your champion, right? So if I have a variable here called level, and I start at level 1, can you write a function which would say level up, for example, and what should happen when a champion levels up? And let's not worry about the skills for now, because that's a bit more complex. Let's just worry about what happens to whatever we have here whenever a champion levels up. With that, I am going to end the video. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.